Zealand. Our next presenter in this session 6, Gautam Kishor, will take us through logistics, documentation, freight, and associated costs. Gautam represents EIF International New Zealand in their business development and as their business development and relationship manager. Good afternoon and welcome, Gautam. EIF International is one of many freight forwarding agents in New Zealand with presence in a small number of Pacific Island countries. EIF provides logistic and freight forwarding solutions for SMEs, which can be a daunting exercise for startups, let alone for established businesses. Transport costs, clearance documentation charges, customs clearance costs, warehousing, distribution, when added together can burn into our operating costs. Gautam will talk us through freight solutions for your business, understand intercoms and Incoterms, and where the risk sits across the buyer or seller divide. He will also share export case scenarios and other pertinent information. Welcome, Gautam. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. The floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gautam Kishor, and yes, Glenn has said, I'm the Business Development Manager for EIF International. We are a freight forwarding company based in New Zealand, Australia, and 2 offices in Fiji. And we are providing freight and logistics solutions to many of our clients, both from New Zealand into the Pacific Islands and from Pacific Islands into New Zealand and other regions such as other international regions. And thank you, PTI, for giving us this opportunity to be part of this seminar. And hopefully we can share some information to help these customers out. Okay. Just briefly on EIF. EIF is a 100% owned New Zealand company. It was set up 17 years ago by our current director's dad, Bob Land. This business is owned by 2 sisters, Joe and Anne Mary Land, and they have been operating for the last 17 years. The point of difference of EIF compared to other freight forwarding companies is we have a, we call it dedicated account manager, who basically handles all your shipment. So different companies have different ways of handling customers. Ours is totally different. We like one customer, one account manager to handle the customer so they can provide proper service from scratch to the end. So that's how we operate. Our other key point of difference is our communications is paramount to seamless service, and our quality staff are all handpicked and have long-term industry experience to provide solutions and service we provide to our and pride of our company and further on. Okay, who we are, our approach. So our business is an extension of our business, which end by assisting your success is our success. The scope of service we offer currently is, so we offer sea freight. You can see is variety container size, so we move container loads, flat tracks, open tops, which is mostly used for heavy machineries, vehicles, project cargo, LCL and LCL consolidation. So we also move small volume of cargo. So if any person who has small volume, let's say a pallet size, and he doesn't have or he or she doesn't have a container load, we can still move it. LCL consolidation, what we mean is we pack our own containers to all the Pacific Islands. So that includes Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, Solomons, Vanuatu, PNG. So we have our own container packed for these islands. So anyone who has small container loads, we can always pack and ship it for them. They don't have to wait for the full containers before it's been shipped out. We provide door-to-door tracking of consignments. All paperwork and customs clearance are handled in-house. Fast pickup delivery, so we provide pickup and delivery service. The type of container you have can determine how you will be able to organize your freight to make the most use of space. So the people who are working in our warehouse, they have a lot of experience, and we are basically pack in a way to minimize space and also we pack in a way so that your container, you don't waste space. So we always communicate with our suppliers and with customers to make sure that if we're sending a container, it has to be full. The next service we provide is EIF, is air freight. So you can see it's consolidation and direct airline. We provide air freight services from all over the world into New Zealand and from New Zealand into the Pacific Islands and vice versa. So we also provide service out of the islands into New Zealand. The advantage of air freight is time sensitive, but looking at current situation, which is because of COVID-19, airlines are not operating. So the rates has really skyrocketed, but still we can provide service. High value cargo. So this is the reasons why we use air freight is because your cargo is high value, it is a dangerous cargo, and plus it's a perishable. So this all need to be moved faster so that you can process it and you can use it in your business. The next service we provide is called 3PL warehousing. Okay, so 3PL warehousing is a modern day warehousing. Not a lot of people know about this. So we have experience pre-COVID, businesses used to own a small warehouse, right? Because at that time the rent was cheap, the business was operating well, and the shipments was coming on time. But after COVID, what we have seen is a lot of people or businesses have given up renting a warehouse because number one, the freight rate has gone high, right? They are not able to accommodate cost, labor cost has gone up, this other cost, which is increasing daily. So 3PL warehousing, what we do is we can pack your containers, we can unpack your containers, we can store goods for you, we can pick and pack orders, we do your stock reporting, and we can distribute on your behalf within the region. So what happens is you really don't need a warehouse. You can stay home, you can do your sales, you can bring orders, give it to us, and we will do all the job for you. So that will basically help you reducing your operational cost. You don't have to hire a forklift, you don't have to hire staff. You really don't need anything. Just need to focus on your sales and getting orders, while our company like us can help you with your running around. Okay, so this is just a brief of our warehouse. This is our current new warehouse, which has about 22,000 pallet position. You can see how this warehouse has been set up. So this is all cargo sitting in our warehouses for 3PL. The customers can be anywhere in the world, but they can operate from there. They can be home. And what we do is once we receive the order, we pick an order for them and we'll deliver to their clients. So this is how our warehouse is currently at the moment. And this is how we pack for our clients. Okay, the next we're gonna discuss is key players in exporting supply chain. So I understand that a lot of companies and suppliers, they export from Pacific Islands into New Zealand. So we're gonna discuss what are the key players to make sure that when your goods arrive into New Zealand, there is no restrictions, that you are able to clear on time, which includes customs clearance, biosecurities. So every party which is involved in a supply chain plays a major role. If one party makes some mistake, then that means the whole channel cannot be processed. So from the supplier, from the grower to the receiver, which is the final customer, everyone can be successful if every party in between follows the right channel. Okay, requirements for import and export into New Zealand. You can see these are the requirements. If you are importing into New Zealand or your customer is importing into New Zealand, first is we call it New Zealand customs, right? So there is certain customs formalities that needs to be followed, which is we're going to discuss on the next slide. MPI, which is the Ministry of Primary Industries or New Zealand Biosecurity, and the most important is shipping documentation. So if all this falls in place, that means you are doing it right. If it doesn't fall in place, that means there's something going wrong. Okay, so New Zealand Customs, in order to clear your shipment. So if you're sending any shipments out of any place into New Zealand, these are the things you need. First is commercial invoice. A commercial invoice will always show you supply details. That means the person who is shipping must show a value, that means value of the goods. A currency must indicate terms. Terms is the shipping terms, and also should have itemized all goods. So if there is, let's say, 200 items, all the item has to be itemized because different items catches different duty rates, or some are on agreement terms. Like, for example, some are on professional tariff, there's no duties on that. So all the items coming into New Zealand has to be itemized so that the broker is able to put it under right code. And the next one is packing list. So packing list is basically explaining more about the packaging. New Zealand biosecurity, right? So these are the requirements we need if you are getting a container into New Zealand. Full containers must have a quarantine declaration. Phytosanitary certificate. So phytosanitary certificate for fresh and frozen produce, any items derived from plant matter. So if you're sending any plant material or anything derived from plant material, has to have a phytosanitary. Fresh produce, MPI will require and will cite original copies of phytosanitary, right? So if you are sending fresh vegetables or produce, that means a original phytoset has to be carried with the shipment. Frozen produce, original is not required. A scan will be accepted as far as it has all relevant information for MPI processing. So you can see the difference between fresh and frozen, right? The reason why frozen does not require a original phytoset is because it's already in a temperature. It's already in a frozen mode, which means if there's any kind of insects or anything which will be basically killed with the frozen. But with the fresh is different, because fresh usually attracts insects and other species, right? So it has to be on original phytosets. We'll also include fumigation certificates. So we need to have fumigation certificates, etc. MPI quarantine declaration. So this is a sample container declaration form which needs to be filled if you are sending a container to New Zealand. And on request, we can always send you a form, or we can send it to PTI and you can access it from PTI. So this is a sample form which has to be filled. Without this form, we cannot clear your container. Okay, now we're moving to the shipping documentation. So this is a very key area, and a lot of exporters has made a mistake, and which will usually delay your shipment. So bill of lading is basically, this is a paperwork from shipping line, freight forwarder, and will show shipping details, right? So which means it's basically shows where it's coming from, who's sending it, who's the receiver, right? And that can be used for clearing shipments. The number two part of shipping documentation is terms, Incoterms. So Incoterms is also known as trade terms, are key elements of international contracts of sale. They will tell parties what we expect to carriage of the goods from buyer to seller, and at the same time export and import clearance. They also explain the division of cost and risk between the parties. So there are three major terms which is used in modern day trade. First one is free on board. This term means that the seller delivers the goods. So in simple terms, FOB means the seller's responsibility is just to deliver the goods to the port, and the buyer's responsibility is to arrange the freight on his own cost and risk. The second term is CFR, we call it cost freight. So in this term, the seller basically provide all the service, which includes the cost of the goods, the freight, and also the other charges. So that's why it's called cost and freight. The term means the seller delivers when the goods pass the ship rail in the port of shipment. Seller must pay the cost and freight necessary to bring the goods, right? So basically the freight and other charges falls under seller's responsibility. The next term is CIF. CIF is not much difference from CFR. The only difference is CIF covers the insurance. So this is the final trade terms which is used by most of the trade companies is CIF, which means covers your cost, the insurance, and the freight. The seller delivers the goods past the ship rail in port of shipment. Seller must pay the cost and freight necessary to bring the goods to the named port of destination. Also include risk of loss and damage. So we have seen since post-COVID, a lot of companies are using CIF term because with all the delays happening in overseas ports, it's better to insure your goods so that if anything happens, at least you can recover the cost. Okay, activities upon arrival in the export country. So now you can see the cartoons, and they are explaining what are the requirements when the goods arrive from the export countries. Okay, so you as an importer, so if someone is exporting into New Zealand, for example, so the person who is receiving end, that means the importer, first of all, he needs to apply NZ importer code. So this code is a customs client code, which is used to clear all the goods. So if you don't have this code, we cannot basically process your customs clearance. If you're importing foods, for food items, you will require food safety approval. So there's another approval. So customs approval is different from food approval. So you have to apply for customs approval first, and then you need to have a food approval. I understand that a lot of commodities which is coming from Pacific Islands to New Zealand is food items, which is frozen food or fresh foods, right? Because agriculture is a major economy for many in the Pacific Island. So I would say 90% of exports and imports into New Zealand from Pacific Islands will fall under food. So the next is contact a freight forwarder agent to assist with the cost. So please always remember, do not ship blindly. It's always better to get in contact with the freight forwarder, get the costing done before you ship it. Because if you assume that, oh, this will be the cost, probably you are making a mistake. And now post-COVID, a lot of things have changed in terms of freight rate, in terms of customs clearance, charges, there's additional charges, cartage rate changes every day, currency changes every day. So you have to be pretty sure that you are taking all the cost before you're sending any goods or importing any goods into New Zealand. Will be required to pay New Zealand customs GST and any biosecurity cost upfront. Just a simple example, we have seen a lot of, because our company does a lot of produce clearance, which is frozen. We have seen a lot of companies who are importing frozen food under personal shipments, right? So they are paying GST to customs, but they are not able to claim GST. Why? Because they are operating under personal business, right? And if you like to grow in your business, the best way to do is you need to have a proper setup. That means have a company registered, you pay GST so you can claim your GSTs. And a lot of companies here are not doing it. So this is probably is a kind of loss, because you really don't know that there is an additional cost, which is GST. So this is a importer and supplier code. Any of you who's looking to import into New Zealand, or any of you are thinking of exporting into New Zealand, please do discuss with your buyers. So this is a sample customs client code form, which can be filled and can be sent it to EI, or can be sent to us, and we can lodge it for you, and you can get a customs client code. Okay, customs duty GST. Customs duty GST, Cook Islands is part of Spagata. So basically not Cook Islands, most of the Pacific Islands country are under Spatica, or they are under PICTA, and they fall under zero duty, but still there is a 15% GST. So I have said a part of the article from the New Zealand Customs, 2 articles, which you guys can view and see that anything coming from the Pacific Island does not have any duty, but subject to 15% GST. So in the earlier I was discussing earlier on the PowerPoint, is that if you are registering a company, that means you pay GST and you can claim it back. So this is a reason it will help you out. If you're not registered a company, that means you're paying GST, but you cannot claim it. So you can see the reason, the importance of having a business being registered. Okay. Now this is a simple scenario. We are going to discuss you with 2 case studies which our company has handled in previous years, and this will be probably everyone will be surprised to see, if you do not follow proper channels, no, you're going to get into a lot of running around. So a couple of years ago, we had a customer of ours imported watermelons from Tonga, and what the customer did, customer packaged I think 3 containers of watermelon, shipped it to New Zealand, and then flew from Tonga to New Zealand to come and clear his cargo. He was told by the authorities that he cannot clear on his own, so he needs to go back to a freight forwarding or a customs clearance agency like EIF. And so the customer worked to us and said, hey, I got 3 containers of watermelon, and if we can help out with the clearance. So number one, the customer had no client code. To get a client code, it takes 3 days. So we had to apply for client code and supply code. Once we received the client code from the customs, so we lodged the customs clearance. So codes was applied after 3 days, clearance begins, container is cleared and then delivered to approved facility to be inspected. You can get an appointment from MPI to inspect until after the clearance is complete, right? So there's a lot of process involved. You cannot just get the container out of the wharf and start selling it. There's a certain process which is getting the customs cleared, pay the GST, get the container to the approved facility, get inspected. When it's all good, then you can start delivering it or start the distribution. So we managed to do that. We managed to do the customs clearance, book the MPI, and MPI inspection, which is another 2 days away. So see, we had done the customs clearance, but the MPI was available after 2 days. So it's already a week gone in terms of just getting the client code and getting the clearance and the MPI inspection. MPI comes and inspects goods. Goods are fumigated, right? And then once the goods is fumigated, we found a lot of midges in the watermelon. So after the inspection, the MPI decided that it's not good for our economy, so it was taken for fumigation. So you can see the container waits. 2 days later, results show that the bugs are problem and container to be fumigated. Fumigation organized for the next day, container released. From arrival to the product being able to deliver to buyer, overall took 2 weeks. So you can see container arrived 2 weeks ago, but it took us 2 weeks to get it cleared because the exporter had not followed the right channel, which is getting his client, his codes done, not getting the proper shipping documentation, etc. So this is not the problem. Now starts is double fumigation cost. So according to the final sets we received from the shipping country was that we have received the container was fumigated, but when we opened the container for inspection, the container was not fumigation. So double fumigation cost if the supplier has paid. Number two, there is a potential damage. You can see it's $110 per day. Then we have potential container detentions from the shipping line and 3-day delay before clearance could begin. So apart from not doing the right thing from the beginning, which also involves a lot of cost, and that cost is always added to the product. By the time the product goes to the market, your product will be higher in price. And that's the reason a lot of Pacific Island businesses or exporters have failed, is because they haven't done the homework. They haven't followed the right process. Right? If you follow the right process, you will save a lot of cost and get the cargo out ASAP and able to get to the market. Businesses here will not wait for you to get a cargo after 2 weeks because they have to run a business. If you cannot supply, they will go to someone else. And so this is some of the pictures how this watermelon came and how. So the packing was correct, but basically the right process wasn't followed. Right. Case study 2, you can see import of frozen produce from Fiji. So this is very simple. Frozen produce does not have much restrictions as far as if all the proper documentation is provided, it can be cleared over 3 days time. So you can see our boys are unpacking frozen food from Tonga, Samoa, and Fiji. It's all basically yams, cassava, all the root crops. And yes, we come to the final presentation. So this is our EIF International. These are our contact details. If you require further assistance in importing, exporting of your goods, please don't hesitate to contact us. We are under essential service. We are operating daily. So someone will be available to help you out with your request.
Oh, thank you very much, Gautam. Just stay with us for a few more minutes as we go through some of the questions that are coming through directed at you, if you don't mind.
Yep, sure.
First question is, what would you say the percentage would be a average percentage split of your business between the volumes of fresh and frozen produce that your company deals with coming in from the Pacific Island countries?
I would say probably 75% frozen and 25% fresh vegetables, also between fresh and frozen. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Because we have seen, because I think it comes down to what people like I discussed now. Frozen has less restrictions and less complications compared to fresh, but fresh has better margin over frozen. So we have seen a lot of, because people don't want to take risk, so they are getting more frozen over fresh.
Yeah. And the frozen volumes that your company is clearing and distributing from the Pacific, is a lot of that going into the formal or informal markets here in New Zealand?
Okay, just a small thing. So we do customs clearance, but we don't get involved in distribution. So we can help with customs clearance. We do not do aftermarket, so we're not involved in the distribution. But as far as we know, to our knowledge, between 1 to 10, I would say 9 is informal and 1 is formal.
Yeah. Yes, you're correct. You don't get involved in distribution, but even be that as it may, you still have, as an importer, and through your warehousing and the logistics that you help out with, you do know where, to a certain extent, where those those produce and those containers are heading, right?
Yeah.
So you answered the question. So you're saying that for your business, your company, the volumes of containers that you handle and help clear coming from the Pacific Island countries, every 1 out of 10 is aimed at the formal market, and every 9 out of 10 for the informal market, correct?
Totally correct.
Okay, all right. All right, there is a question around, it says here, if I may read it, if you don't mind. For processed packaged products being sent from a Pacific Island country to a fulfillment, I think it is, location in New Zealand for the purpose of fulfilling online e-commerce orders that will be delivered locally in New Zealand and internationally, is a New Zealand importer and supplier code required?
Okay, yes. So anything which enters New Zealand commerce has to have a importer and exporter code. And so yes, so anything which, so it's very simple. Anything which is entering New Zealand commerce, and for us to proceed with clearance, has to have an importer and exporter code. Unless if your goods is below $1,000, it will be cleared under, we call it simplified entry. But if it's coming for commercial purpose, maybe a couple of times you can clear under simplified, which is below $1,000. But if it's entering our commerce, it has to be cleared properly so that we can get it into our system. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. I hope the person who posed the question has received the answer he or she is sought. There is another question. It says, if I am importing an item from a country different than a manufacturing country, which country is considered when calculating import duty? For example, I am importing an item from Singapore. The product is manufactured in the US. Will the duty be charged as per USA or Singapore?
Okay, it depends the state of the good. So if the state of the goods changes in Singapore, then we will basically, that means the goods status has changed in Singapore, we will then stick with the Singapore's requirement. If the state of the good does not change, then we will go back to the country of origin. But for that to prove that it's coming from USA, then you have to provide more supportive documentation. So putting an example, for example, if you're getting a garment from India and goes to Fiji, right? Then Fiji prepares into a final, let's say, a t-shirt. So now the product has changed from garment to t-shirt. So the duty will attract on the t-shirt, not on the garment. So it also depends on what is the final good. If it's a raw material and put into a final good, then it will attract the final good, not the raw material. So we have to look into what kind of good it is. Yeah. So if someone can say what is the good or what kind of goods you're looking at, then we can specifically look into it. But if it's any good which is changing its state, then whichever country has changed the state, that country's rule will apply.
Okay. I mean, for me personally, that dealing in trade, and that makes sense to me. I'm not too sure whether that makes sense to the person who asked the question. However, feel free to contact our office, and we'll work with Gautam, and others to answer your question again in fuller if so require.
Yep.
Also, another question to you, Gautam. To apply and import a code for the client, do we apply online or custom officer at the country of origin or from New Zealand Customs?
Okay, you cannot apply online. You can apply, yes, you can also apply online yourself. If you have supportive documentation, there's a generic email address for New Zealand Customs, and you can just fill the form and send it through with your proof of identities, and you should be able to get a code. But freight forwarders like us can assist in terms of getting the result faster, because the systems we are using is linked to New Zealand Customs, so we can lodge it, and probably within a day or two we can get your client code. While you just doing it yourself probably take some time, because of course there's a workload which is going and everyone is working remotely at the moment, so that may also hinder your result.
Okay, you talked about phytosanitary and the importance of phyto and having those correct documentation, such as phyto certificates. MPI, correct me if I'm wrong, but they introduced an e-phyto when COVID hit. Is that correct? And then how does that, has e-phyto alleviated some of the challenges around original documentation in your experience?
Yes, so Efito has been introduced by MPI to help with customs import clearance, right? Which is acceptable. That means previously it was, if you have an original FIDO, then you can start customs clearance. But with eFIDO, you can start, so with that you can start customs clearance, so you don't have to wait for the original to come. But any fresh produce coming out of any country still needs to come with the original FIDO sets. And that original copy has to be sent by the country of the export, which is, for example, if it's coming from Fiji, the MPI Fiji Biosecurity has to send that e-sets direct to MPI New Zealand.
Okay.
Because people can't play around with the documentation, and that's the reason it has to be linked between Biosecurity Fiji and MPI New Zealand.
Well, I'm sure there's not hope that sort of business practice going on. So I'm sure everyone's above the board and try their best to do what
so
is.
that's only for fresh. The frozen it's always been FIDO set, so there hasn't been any problem. And the practice was always been there for frozen. So yeah.
Correct. Yes. And the last question, if you don't mind, Gautam, there's I mentioned. I asked you the question about your volumes coming in and hitting the formal and informal market. So that's prompted a question for some explanation. And whilst I'm happy to answer it, I'll put it to you as you have the floor. If you could just provide, from your perspective, what you perceive as being the informal market in New Zealand and the formal market. So just some explanation around that, I think, would be useful for the person who asked the question.
Okay, so so I'm going back to basically agricultural products or frozen food, right? So when we mean informal market, there's a lot of personal importers who bring, or a family is taking a container in an island and sending to a family in New Zealand. What that person does is he clears the container under personal use and then does door-to-door sale, which means either that person sells that produce from home, or he can go to a fair market or a flea market or a Saturday market in Otara, Otahu, Papatoe, whatever. So that becomes that informal market does not enter our commerce. It is entered into our personal consumption. And that informal market doesn't have proper packaging. So it's like, for example, the photos I showed you about the frozen container, you can see these bags are in 20 kg. A customer of a formal will never buy a 20 kg. He will buy a 2 kg or 1 kg pack of produce, right? So we have seen that a lot of online businesses or personal businesses are focusing on informal market because it's easy. You go sell, get a cash flow in. While the formal market, getting into the formal market is a long term, and it has its own advantage. But to start into the formal market, there's a lot of costs, such as right way of packaging, labeling, barcoding. You have to have a what do you call it? Proper documentation. You have to have your expiry dates. So there's a lot of costs which is involved into the formal market, and there's a reason with that cost some farmers or exporters are not able to cope with. So they have just moved into informal market because it's easy. Just pack, sell it, get the money, and it has been repetitive. The other disadvantage a lot of informal customers have said is they have no one who can help them to get into the formal markets. They're like bigger players who wants to be middlemen, and for them to make money through middlemen is not enough. So for them it's easy. They send it and there's no one involved, sell it to the market, to the informal market, get the money, and they're done. So
for in New Zealand's case, it would be safe to say that the majority of customers in the informal market are the Pacific diaspora, correct?
Yes.
So the Pacific Islanders living in New Zealand,
Yes.
who receive fresh and frozen, mostly frozen bags of commodities from their home countries.
Yep.
Okay. I think we've answered the question more than enough, Gautam. We just have one last one, and we're going to have to call this session to a close. This is a question around online registration for client code. Do we need to be a company that is locally registered in New Zealand?
Yes. So in order for you to apply client code, you need to be registered in New Zealand. New Zealand business. It has to be a New Zealand business.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Gautam, for your time this afternoon. Sorry, I'm sure those online have learned a lot, hopefully, from the examples and the case studies you were able to share, and some of the important information around, documentation and freight and the types of assistance that your company can help with. So thank you for joining us. We're always a pleasure to have EIF come on board alongside us on our Path to Market webinars. This is not the first time for your company, and we certainly look forward to keeping in touch with you. So thank you, Gautam.
Okay, thank you, Glennis.
Thank you. Okay, we move